In our bustling world filled with noise and ceaseless chatter, we often find ourselves overwhelmed by the weight of our concerns and struggles. The temptation to act, to speak, to control is ever present. Yet, sometimes, it is in the stillness, in the moments when we choose silence, that the truest form of trust is revealed. There is a profound message that resounds within the quiet of our hearts, a message that calls us to trust even when we cannot see the full path ahead. It invites us to rest in the knowledge that there is a greater wisdom, a divine presence that knows the way, and that all we are called to do is surrender. In times of uncertainty, when the world feels too loud and our own hearts too restless, the most powerful act we can perform is not to strive or to seek, but to trust and to remain silent. It is not a silence of despair or defeat, but one of surrender and faith, a recognition that in the quiet we are not alone. It is in these moments, when we let go of our need for control, that we make room for a peace far deeper than any understanding or effort could provide. This is the call to trust. Trust in the divine, trust in the process, and trust that sometimes the best answer is simply to stay silent. Here are 6 headings. 1. Embracing the power of silence in a noisy world. 2. Trusting in God's plan beyond our understanding. 3. The strength found in surrendering control. 4. Finding peace in the quiet moments of life. 5. Letting go, the transformative act of trusting God. 6. Silent faith, how patience leads to divine clarity. Explanation of headings are: in a world that seems to be in constant motion, where the cacophony of voices, demands, and distractions surrounds us at every turn, silence becomes a rare and precious commodity. It is easy to believe that the more we speak, the more we act, the more we assert ourselves, the more control we have over our lives and circumstances. But the reality is far from this illusion. In truth, it is often in the moments when we choose silence, when we intentionally step away from the noise, that we find our greatest strength. Silence, contrary to what one might assume, is not a passive retreat. It is an active decision, a courageous choice to trust in something far greater than our own limited understanding. In the busyness of life, we are conditioned to believe that action, noise, and constant movement are the marks of success and purpose. Yet it is in the stillness that we begin to truly hear the whispers of wisdom, the deep calls of the heart, and the voice of the divine guiding us on our path. To embrace silence in such a world requires a shift in perspective, a recognition that we are not defined by what we do, but by who we are. In those moments of stillness, when we resist the urge to speak, to act, or to control, we make space for God to work within us. It is in the silence that we allow our minds and hearts to quiet enough to hear the subtle, yet unmistakable message of trust. Trust that everything will unfold as it should. Trust that we are never alone, even when we cannot see the way. Trust that, sometimes, the best response is simply to wait, to listen, and to be. The power of silence lies in its ability to calm the mind and clear the clutter of our thoughts. In that quiet, we find the courage to let go of our anxieties, our fears, and our need for constant validation. In our silence, we discover the presence of peace that surpasses all understanding. A peace that is not dependent on our circumstances, but on the deep, abiding trust that we are held by something much larger than ourselves. It is this peace that strengthens us, restores us, and empowers us to move forward with clarity and purpose. In our lives, we will face moments of uncertainty, confusion, and difficulty. In those times, the world may urge us to act quickly, to speak our minds, to fix the situation. But sometimes the most powerful and transformative response is not to do, but to be still, to listen, and to trust. By embracing the power of silence, we align ourselves with a deeper purpose, a divine wisdom that knows far more than we can comprehend. In silence, we find strength. In silence, we find God. and in that silence, we are made whole. There are moments in life when we stand on the edge of uncertainty, when the path before us seems unclear and the future is veiled in mystery. In these times, the natural impulse is to grasp for control, to try to make sense of the chaos, and to force an understanding where there is none. Yet the invitation of faith, the invitation from a higher purpose, calls us to let go of our need to comprehend every detail and to trust in the unfolding plan, even when we cannot see the way. Trusting in God's plan, especially when it goes beyond our understanding, is not a simple task. It is easy to trust when things are clear, when our steps are sure and our direction fixed. But it is when the path is shadowed, when the winds of doubt howl, that we are called to a deeper faith. In those times, we must release the illusion that our small, finite minds can grasp the grand designs of the Creator. We are not asked to understand the full picture, but to trust that there is a purpose greater than our limited view. This trust is not a blind faith, nor is it an empty resignation. It is an active, intentional decision to believe that, though we cannot see the full picture, we are part of a story that is being written with infinite wisdom and love. The challenges and setbacks that we face may seem like obstacles, but in the greater tapestry of life, they are not random or meaningless. They are part of a plan that, though it may be hidden from our immediate sight, is always working towards something good, something purposeful. To trust in God's plan beyond our understanding is to surrender the need for immediate answers, to acknowledge that we do not have control over every circumstance, and to rest in the assurance that we are not alone in our journey. It is to accept that, though we may not understand why certain things happen, we are still held in the hands of the Divine, who sees the beginning from the end. Our understanding is limited, but God's vision is eternal. What may appear as a detour or a hardship is, in fact, part of a greater plan, one that is shaping us, refining us, and leading us towards something more magnificent than we could ever imagine. It is in those moments when we choose to trust, when we relinquish our need to understand and simply allow the divine plan to unfold, that we experience a peace that transcends our circumstances. We may not have all the answers, but we have the assurance that there is a purpose, a design that is far beyond our comprehension, and that it is good. This trust does not erase the struggles or the doubts, but it grants us the strength to move through them with hope, knowing that we are part of a story far greater than ourselves. In the end, trusting in God's plan beyond our understanding is not just an act of faith. It is an invitation to embrace the mystery of life, to surrender our need for certainty, and to trust that, in the vastness of the unknown, we are always held. There is a curious paradox that many of us discover as we navigate through life. The more we try to control our circumstances, the more they slip through our fingers. The harder we grasp at the steering wheel, the more we find ourselves driving in circles. It is only when we release our grip and surrender control that we find a deeper, more enduring strength, one that does not arise from our own efforts, but from the wisdom of surrender itself. The human heart is often tempted by the illusion that we must control every aspect of our lives in order to feel secure. We believe that if we can only manage the outcomes, organize every detail, and protect ourselves from uncertainty, we will be at peace. Yet peace is not found in the striving or the controlling. In fact, the more we try to orchestrate our own lives, the more we distance ourselves from the very peace we seek. True strength, paradoxically, is found not in control, but in letting go. Surrendering control does not mean abandoning responsibility or giving up on our aspirations. It is not about passivity or resignation, but rather about recognizing that there are forces greater than ourselves at work in the world, forces of divine wisdom, love, and purpose. When we surrender, we do not abandon our dreams. Instead, we entrust them to something far wiser than our own understanding. It is the acknowledgement that we are not the sole architects of our destiny, but participants in a larger, more beautiful story being written by the hand of God. In these moments of surrender, something profound happens within us. We find a peace that surpasses our human comprehension, a peace that comes not from the certainty of outcomes, but from the assurance that we are held in the care of a loving Creator. The act of surrender frees us from the shackles of fear, for we realize that we do not need to control everything in order for things to be well. Life, in its ebb and flow, becomes less about conquering the storm and more about learning to trust the one who commands it. It is in the surrender of control that we begin to tap into the deeper wells of strength that lie within us. It is as though, by releasing our hold, we make room for a divine power to flow through us, an energy that is calm, steady, and rooted in purpose. This strength is not born of human effort, but of divine partnership, for when we let go, we invite God to work in us and through us in ways that our finite minds cannot fully grasp. In surrender, we do not lose our power, we gain a far greater one. There is an inherent freedom in surrendering control. Freedom from the burden of worry, from the need to have all the answers, and from the endless cycle of striving. It is the freedom to live with open hands, to trust that whatever comes our way is part of a larger, loving plan. When we surrender, we find that we are not weaker but stronger, for we are no longer carrying the weight of the world on our own shoulders. In surrender, we discover that the strength we seek is found not in the battle to control, but in the quiet trust that in the end, all will be well. We live in a world that places great value on control. From the smallest details of our daily routines to the grandest ambitions of our lives, we are conditioned to believe that the key to success and security lies in our ability to manage every outcome, to hold the reins firmly in our hands. Yet, there comes a time in every life when the illusion of control begins to crumble, and we are faced with a humbling reality. There is far more in life that is beyond our grasp than we care to admit. It is in this moment of surrender, when we let go of the need to control every circumstance, that we discover a strength that transcends our own limited power. The strength found in surrendering control is not weakness. Rather, it is the quiet, steadfast courage to trust that there is something greater than our own will at work in our lives. In a world that constantly urges us to take charge and make things happen, surrender feels like a contradiction, a retreat from the very things we are taught to strive for. But in truth, surrender is not an escape. It is the ultimate act of faith, the recognition that we are not alone in our struggles, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is step back and trust. To surrender control does not mean abandoning responsibility or becoming passive in the face of life's challenges. Rather, it is about acknowledging our limitations and realizing that, despite our best efforts, we cannot control everything. There is freedom in this acknowledgement. When we release our need to have everything figured out, to control every outcome, we open ourselves to the possibility of divine intervention, of a higher purpose working through us. In surrender, we let go of the burden of perfection and the endless cycle of worry, and in doing so, we create space for peace to enter our hearts. This strength of surrender comes from knowing that our efforts, while important, are not the only forces shaping our lives. There is a wisdom that far surpasses our understanding, and it is this wisdom that we must trust. When we allow ourselves to let go of control, we align ourselves with something much larger than ourselves. We acknowledge that we are not the masters of our fate, but part of a grander design, one that is guided by love, purpose, and divine timing. In surrender, we become instruments of that greater plan, and through that surrender, we find strength we could not have otherwise imagined. It is also in surrendering control that we find our true power. There is a paradox at work here. By relinquishing our tight grip on life, we are given access to a strength that is not of our own making. We begin to trust the journey, even when it leads us into unknown territories. knowing that we are guided by a force far greater than our own limited understanding. This strength is not loud or forceful, but quiet and enduring. A strength that comes from the knowledge that we are part of something far more significant than ourselves. In the end, the strength found in surrendering control is the freedom to live with peace, knowing that, while we may not have all the answers, we are held by something that does. It is the courage to face life's uncertainties not with fear, but with trust and openness. In surrender, we find our true strength, not in our control, but in our willingness to let go and allow a greater force to guide us. In the rush of daily life, amidst the relentless demands and constant noise, it is easy to lose sight of the quiet moments that offer us a peace far deeper than anything the world can provide. We are constantly urged to move, to do, to achieve, and in this whirlwind of activity, we often forget that the true strength and peace we seek are not found in the loud, the fast, or the constant motion, but in the stillness that exists in the spaces between. It is in these quiet moments, when the world falls away and we are left alone with our thoughts, that we find a peace that transcends understanding. These moments may seem insignificant, perhaps even mundane, but in them lies the gift of rest, a rest for the mind, the heart, and the spirit. The act of simply being present in the quiet allows us to reconnect with the deeper part of ourselves, to hear the whispers of truth and wisdom that are drowned out by the noise of the world. It is here, in the silence, that we come to understand that peace is not something we must chase, but something that can be found when we cease striving and simply allow ourselves to be. To find peace in the quiet moments of life is to recognize the sacredness of stillness. We often think of peace as something that must be earned or fought for, something that comes only after great effort or accomplishment. But in truth, peace is a gift that can be found in the simplest of moments. Whether it is a few minutes of quiet reflection in the morning, a walk in nature, or a moment of stillness before sleep. In these moments, we step away from the noise and the chaos, and are invited to rest in the presence of something far greater than ourselves. The beauty of these quiet moments is that they are not dependent on our circumstances. Whether we are in times of joy or in seasons of struggle, peace can still be found in the stillness. The world may be loud and demanding, but in the quiet spaces, we are reminded that there is a peace that cannot be shaken by the storms of life. This peace is not the absence of trouble, but the assurance that, even in the midst of difficulty, we are held and cared for. It is in the quiet that we learn to trust, to surrender, and to let go of our need to control. In the busyness of life, the quiet moments often feel like a luxury, something we cannot afford. But the truth is, these moments are not luxuries. They are necessities. They are the spaces where we regain our strength, where we recalibrate our minds and hearts, and where we reconnect with the peace that lies at the center of our being. When we make time for these quiet moments, we open ourselves to a deeper relationship with the divine, a relationship that flourishes, not in the noise, but in the stillness. It is in the quiet that we hear the voice of God, not in the form of grand declarations, but in the gentle, whispering reassurance that we are not alone. In those moments, we are reminded that peace is not something to be earned, but a state of being to be embraced. A gift that is always available when we choose to step into the quiet. There are few acts more profound and transformative in life than the simple yet radical act of letting go. To let go is to release the tightly held reins of our desires, our plans, and our expectations, and to place them instead in the hands of something far greater than ourselves. This act is not a sign of weakness or resignation, but one of deep trust. It is the recognition that we are not the ultimate architects of our destiny, and that, despite our best efforts to control every detail, we are not alone in the unfolding of our lives. When we let go, we make room for God's will to shape our path, and in doing so, we find a peace and strength that transcends our understanding. The process of letting go is not always easy. It requires a surrendering of control, a willingness to acknowledge that we cannot manage everything on our own. This can feel like a frightening proposition, for it asks us to relinquish our grip on the things we hold dear, our dreams, our hopes, and our very sense of security. Yet, in this surrender, we discover that we are not losing anything, but gaining everything. To trust in God is to believe that His plan for us is far better than any plan we could craft for ourselves. When we let go, we open ourselves to the possibility that God's timing, His wisdom, and His purpose are more perfect than anything we could conceive. Letting go is not a one-time decision, but a daily act of faith. Each day we must choose again to release our worries, our anxieties, and our need for control. We must choose to trust that God's hands are far more capable than our own, and that His plan, though hidden from our immediate view, is being worked out in our lives for our good. This trust is not passive. It is an active decision to align our will with God's, to step aside from the urge to manipulate every situation, and to rest in the knowledge that we are being guided with love and wisdom. When we let go, we make space for transformation to occur. The more we release our need to control, the more we open ourselves to the healing and growth that only God can provide. It is in the act of trusting Him that we are freed from the burdens of fear and doubt that weigh heavily on our hearts. No longer do we have to carry the weight of our own limitations, for we have entrusted them to the One who is able to do far more than we could ever ask or imagine. In letting go, we are also invited to embrace the unknown. Trusting God means accepting that we cannot always see the path ahead, but we trust that He does. This does not mean that the journey will always be easy, nor that we will understand every twist and turn along the way. But it does mean that, in each moment, we are held by a love that is both steadfast and unshakable. The act of letting go becomes, then, not a loss, but a gift of peace, of surrender, and of trust. As we let go, we are not merely relinquishing control, but embracing the transformative power of divine guidance. In that space of surrender, we find that we are not merely surviving, but thriving, being reshaped into the people we were always meant to become. The transformative act of trusting God invites us into a deeper, more intimate relationship with Him, where our hearts are freed to rest, to grow, and to experience the fullness of His love. In a world that seems to demand instant results, where impatience often rules our hearts and minds, there exists a kind of faith that flourishes in the silence of waiting. This silent faith is not born out of noise or hurried activity, but from a deep, quiet trust in something greater than ourselves. It is the kind of faith that grows strong not in the rush of the moment, but in the stillness between our desires and their fulfillment. In this silence, we discover that patience is not merely the absence of action, but the active choice to wait with trust, knowing that, in time, clarity will come. Silent faith, the kind that waits without grasping, is a paradox in itself. On the surface, it may appear as though nothing is happening, as though no progress is being made. But it is precisely in the moments of quiet waiting that the most profound work is being done. Patience is not a passive resignation to fate, but a deep, living hope that acknowledges the reality of God's timing. It is in this silence that our souls are prepared to receive divine clarity. For it is when we stop rushing, when we cease the endless striving, that our hearts become open to the wisdom that can only come through stillness. The challenge of silent faith lies in trusting that clarity will come, even when it seems that everything is obscured by uncertainty. We live in a world where answers are expected now, and yet God's wisdom often unfolds slowly, patiently, like the unfolding of a flower. It is tempting in moments of confusion or difficulty to take matters into our own hands, to force a solution or to demand that the answers come immediately. Yet it is often in the waiting, when we relinquish our need for control, that we begin to see things as they truly are. The silence that we fear, the waiting that we resist, is the very space in which God speaks most clearly. Patience is not merely about waiting, it is about trusting that the waiting itself has a purpose. In the quiet of our hearts, as we wait for God to reveal His plan, we are shaped, refined, and transformed. It is in the silence that our impatience is replaced by peace, our anxiety by trust, and our uncertainty by clarity. We begin to see that God does not work according to our timetable, but according to a divine plan that is far beyond our comprehension. In this silent faith, we learn to embrace the process, to trust that each moment of waiting is part of a greater story being written for our good. As we practice this silent faith, we discover that patience does not make us weaker, but stronger. In the quiet, we find a strength that comes not from our own efforts, but from a deep, abiding trust that God is at work, even when we cannot see it. This trust allows us to wait without fear, to rest in the knowledge that, in time, the clarity we seek will come. And when it does, it will be far more profound and perfect than anything we could have imagined in our hurried desires. Silent faith teaches us that patience is not a burden, but a gift. It is the gift of trusting that God's plan for us is unfolding exactly as it should, even when the road ahead is unclear. In the silence, we find divine clarity not through our own striving, but through our willingness to wait and trust. And in that waiting, we discover that peace is not something to be found in action, but in the patient stillness of a heart that trusts in God's perfect timing. In the end, silent faith teaches us that true strength comes not from control, but from trusting in God's perfect timing. As we surrender our need for answers and embrace the stillness, we make room for clarity to emerge. Patience is not a burden, but a gift that allows us to rest in God's wisdom and love. So, let us trust, wait, and find peace in the silence, knowing that divine clarity will come when the time is right.